Welcome back to GameVault HQ. Today we're diving into a blast from the past with Sime Is Back 3D. It's an old-school throwback that blends the charm of classic 90s gameplay with a few modern touches. This game doesn't rely on nostalgia alone. It brings something fresh while keeping that vintage magic alive. Whether you're here because you miss the simpler graphics or you're just curious about how old-school design holds up in the current gaming scene, stick around. Let's see if Sime's comeback is worth your time. One of the standout aspects of Sime Is Back 3D is that it's completely free to play, making it an easy choice if you're curious about reliving that old-school platformer magic without any cost. Sime Is Back 3D might remind you of those quirky platformers that took up entire weekends, the kind where the graphics were charmingly blocky and the objectives were simple yet addictive. The gameplay, at first glance, is a love letter to old-school mechanics. From the very start, you're met with a colorful, pixelated world that pulls you in with nostalgia. But unlike many attempts at recreating that magic, Sime Is Back 3D doesn't stop there. It manages to add enough twists and depth to make it engaging for both retro lovers and newcomers. The storyline is as simple as you'd expect, but in a good way. You're thrown into a vibrant 3D world to help Sime on his journey. A journey filled with wacky enemies, platforming challenges, and tons of collectibles. It's not here to confuse you with deep, convoluted lore. Instead, the game aims to entertain with straightforward objectives. You have to collect special tokens, overcome obstacles, and battle unique bosses. Each level feels like a little sandbox, letting you experiment while maintaining that focused, linear progression. What makes this game stand out from other retro-inspired titles is the level design. Sime's world is a mix of 3D platforming sections filled with puzzles and action elements. It's easy to see that the developers genuinely cared about keeping the experience entertaining without becoming overly repetitive. Each level is designed with love, from tight platforming sequences that challenge your reflexes to open areas that let you take a break from precision jumps and instead focus on exploring. The controls are simple and effective, sticking to the basics of movement, jumping, and interacting with objects. It's got a responsive feel, which is absolutely critical for a platformer. There's nothing more frustrating than feeling like you're fighting with the controls, and Sime Is Back 3D manages to keep that frustration away. Even the more complex maneuvers come naturally once you've spent a bit of time playing. It's all about timing, and with practice, you get that satisfying sense of improvement, level by level. Graphically, Sime Is Back 3D stays true to its old-school roots while introducing just a few modern elements to keep it visually engaging. The environments are colorful, cheerful, and slightly whimsical, a perfect fit for the lighthearted tone of the game. The developers have embraced that nostalgic, chunky 3D look without it ever feeling too clunky. They also added some nice visual tweaks. There's subtle lighting that gives depth to the scenes, and smooth animations that give characters a bit of personality. The sound design is where the game truly shows off its charm. The soundtrack is catchy and reminiscent of the 90s era, with upbeat chiptune-inspired melodies that match the game's playful energy. Sound effects also do their part in enhancing the experience. Whether it's the boing of a jump or the cheerful noise when you grab a collectible, everything feels well-suited to the game's vibe. It's clear that the audio team wanted to bring players back to a simpler time, and they nailed it. Now, let's talk about what's not so great. The game does fall into a few traps typical of older platformers. Mainly, it sometimes relies on trial and error to ramp up the difficulty. This can be both fun and annoying, depending on your tolerance for repeating sections to nail a specific jump or enemy encounter. There are moments where you'll be attempting a jump for the 5th time and wonder if it's you or the game's mechanics that are the problem. It doesn't quite cross the line into frustrating territory, but it's something to keep in mind if patience isn't your strong suit. Another small drawback is the boss battles. While they're visually interesting and often quirky, they sometimes lack depth. They tend to follow predictable patterns, and once you've figured that out, it's all about repeating the same actions until you win. For some, this predictability might make them feel less exciting compared to the levels leading up to them. which are often much more varied. But here's the thing. Sime Is Back 3D isn't trying to redefine what platformers should be in the modern era. It's here to remind you why you loved them in the first place. The simple gameplay, the cheery visuals, the classic difficulty curve, they're all part of what makes this game an enjoyable experience. It's one of those titles you can pick up and immediately feel comfortable with, as if you're revisiting an old friend. For retro fans, Sime Is Back 3D is a wonderful throwback. It brings the best elements of classic platformers while smoothing over some of the rougher edges. It doesn't add unnecessary complexity or try to fix what wasn't broken about those games. Instead, it embraces that timeless formula and tweaks it just enough to keep things interesting for players today. If you're in the mood for a cheerful, no-pressure adventure with plenty of platforms to jump on and puzzles to solve, Sime's journey is worth checking out. It's not perfect, but it's a love letter to a simpler time in gaming with enough modern polish to keep you playing. If you enjoyed today's review, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more game reviews. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.